Feel free to put any questions in the chat box though, because what I'll do is I'll record this on gallery, and then as I upload, it'll basically look like a platform where it's just basically me and Jimmy talking. But obviously, I want you to be able to voice any questions that you've got as well. Okay, cool. Let me stop sharing. Sweet. So I've kind of got some leading questions, Jimmy, just to kind of give us some structure to this conversation. But obviously, we might end up going on tangents anyway and stuff like that. So we'll kind of just take it as it comes. But just for anyone that obviously doesn't know, like where you're based or, how long you've been a coach or anything like that, just give us a brief intro into who you are.
Oh, so I am based in Sheffield. It is like a private PT studio that I work from mostly. So I do between like 10 to 15 sessions a week. And then the majority of my client base is actually online at the minute. And I've been a coach for 7 years. Yeah, 7 years, I think. I
Cool.
need to check. I need to double check that
Of course, of
though.
course. You survived the COVID era of coaching.
Yeah, I was lucky because most of my client base just like adopted like those Zoom workouts. I was like,
Nice.
it was funny times.
Because you said that you're mostly like online now. Was COVID the transition point for you in building your online?
It was, but in like kind of secret. So like, because I was working for a guy at that time, but like most of my clients like transitioned online, and there was like some of them was quite happy with doing that. But obviously, we dropped like the Zoom workouts, and then we went into like trainerize, like app based. And then I was working at Virgin Active at the time, and then it was like it just kind of like got to a point where I couldn't like stay there because I just wasn't doing enough sessions. So yeah, COVID was the start.
Wild. COVID was a big thing for me. Like that was a huge transition point for me. That's why I asked. Cool. And obviously we got into coaching probably, I want to say about 35 weeks ago, I think it was,
Mm.
give or take. I was kind of totting up the phase timelines earlier. What brought you to coaching those kind of 35 or however long weeks ago? Why did you even invest in a coach in the first place?
Yeah, so I'd actually been thinking about it for a long time. I'd kind of just hit like this place of like it was like stagnation. So I was like there for maybe like 6 months, and it was like I was bulking, but I wasn't seeing like any weight gain at all. And I knew I wanted to do another shoot at some point because I'd not really like challenged myself. I was just like coasting. And then I knew from like previous shoot attempts, like I just didn't enjoy the process at all. And also when I got myself really lean, I knew that it come at the cost of a lot of different things as well. So like my energy, like libido, like I just saw a lot of negative effects from getting lean before. So I was like, I have two options really. I either do it again, like on my own, and go through like the same like quote unquote issues, or obviously get a coach. And that's where I seek help.
Yeah, nice. And it was like timeline wise, I think it was a bit of a maybe blessing's probably not the right word, but a lot of coaches will come to me wanting to do a photo shoot, like starting the prep with me. Whereas we obviously didn't
Yeah.
do that. We did it like 10 weeks of finishing the gaining phase, which was really nice to do together because, you're kind of both on the same page, you know exactly where you're going to be, and it provides a little bit of maybe uh confidence for you in terms of what that gaining phase looked like because like you said, like when you started with me, you perhaps had lost that little bit of like confidence in what a gaining phase should look like. You were putting in a lot of effort but not really getting many returns on that. And if we'd have just gone cool, let's just leave that there and start prep, that wouldn't have necessarily solved any problems for you when it came to the gaining phase side of things. So obviously when you're trying to reiterate that to clients, you don't really get that side of it because let me get the numbers up because we still pushed things in the gaining phase, didn't we?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah. Like I think maybe calories went up like 200, 300.
yeah, you
But
weren't even on like super high calories either. So you came to me at about 85 and we put you on 33 to 3,400 calories.
yeah,
And we kind of climbed that up eventually to just shy of 3,500 calories. But in that 10-week phase, you went from about 85 up to 87.3, well, on average anyway. So that's pretty good returns, I would say, anyway.
Yeah, the issue that I had before is it was probably just consistency in numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. Like consistency with training numbers or with nutrition numbers.
Nutrition numbers. Yeah, it'd always be a case of, I guess, because I was trying to like, and this is probably one of the things that we started off was like eat really clean, whilst hit those numbers. It just didn't work out. Like you can't do both when your calories
Yeah.
are that high.
Yeah. I get that. I get that. It is numbers is a big thing. You know, a lot of people when they're coaching themselves, especially, the numbers don't really they try and do things intuitively a lot. You know, you wouldn't tend to track many variables on your own. Right. That's a big thing for when people invest in coaches. I'm the same. Like I don't when I'm doing things on my own, I'll do it very intuitively and then get frustrated with maybe the lack of change. And then I'll hire a coach, he'll make me track things. And I track things and I'm like, oh yeah, shit, I'm missing this, and this. Um, so yeah, I think that's important as well.
Yeah, yeah. The accountability of having that there of you watching over just means that I'm gonna hit my numbers more consistently, like every time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, man. Talk to me about so one thing that I found through my prep. So after this 10 weeks of beginning phase, we obviously went into a 20-week prep, which sounds like a very, very long prep, right? Like to anyone that does photo shoots, you know, they have this expectation of it might be like 12 weeks or a 14-week prep. So outlining like 20 weeks seems like super long. So how did you feel going into that, knowing it would be so long? And when you were in it, did it feel as long as it sounds?
Yeah, it's really funny actually because when we started it, like 20 weeks, I thought this is gonna be like so long. Like I thought like when we first like preempted it's gonna be like 16, 20 weeks. In my head, I was like, we can get it done in like 12, 16 initially. But as the time went on, that 20 weeks kind of felt like less and less. So it's like the doubt kicks in a little bit, like when you're like, maybe 8, 10 weeks out, and you almost assume like I should be there now. So the 20 weeks it actually felt a lot shorter than what I would have thought. And I think because of how the process was as well, it wasn't it wasn't as hard as previous attempts in terms of where the calories were. So it weren't as though like I was 10 weeks out and just like crawling to the end. I think the way that it were phased was like the intensity gradually increased to a point that I was almost like enjoying it. Maybe like 8 to 10 weeks in, because I started to feel better in my training because I wasn't feeling out of breath at like reps 8. And then also like just like my performance kind of like maintained, if not gained a little bit in the gym as well. So I'd say like it didn't feel like a 20-week thing, really. It felt more like maybe like an 8-week prep
Yeah.
because that was when it got like that little bit more intense.
Yeah. Funnily enough, so Jamie just joined the call, but he's just started a prep, and I was kind of trying to explain this to him, and it is quite hard to explain. But like I explained it like a bell curve. Like the first like 6 weeks is adjustment, right? You're trying to get used to the lower food, the higher step requirements, the higher cardio requirements, and everything's a bit like, okay, I'm just trying to get it round in my head. Like this is how I need to structure my diary and stuff. And it's kind of like you're trying to bring yourself up to working at that pace. And then there's like this weird like 4 to 6 week stint in the middle of prep that's like peak performance where things just click. You like you said, you're fitter, you're leaner, you start actually noticing a lot of those positive differences in your physique. Your strength hasn't dwindled yet. So you're kind of like, this is sick. Like, this is absolutely sound. And I think that's kind of what you're trying to describe there,
Yeah,
right? Where the prep felt like 8 to 10 weeks because it's the downward slope on the other side of that bell curve where you start realizing that you've not got enough food for training performance, and suddenly you're fighting very, very hard just to maintain numbers instead of increasing them and stuff like
yeah,
that, right?
yeah. Like when you're in the deeper stage, you'll want the prep to be longer as well because you're like you start guessing it. So it is that thing of like, yeah, it's it might be a 16, 20 week prep, but you'll thank that time frame
Yeah.
because of the doubts and things you'll get in there. So when you're at the back end, you'll be like, I'm so glad that I've got 6 weeks, 7 weeks left.
I get that. It's one of those. So this kind of leads me on to the next question. So, well, I've got obviously a few questions, but one of them is you had the rare circumstance of entering a prep with the goal of beating your previous best, right? So obviously, naturally, a lot of coaches will come to me. They'll be like, it's my first photo shoot. It's going to be the best and worst you ever do because it's your first photo shoot, right? Whereas for you, it wasn't your first. So how did you find this is kind of a leading question because of my what my experience has been in the past as well. But how did you find managing that mindset of being
Yeah.
your previous best, right? Because that's often talked about for coaches as such a positive concept. Like, it's you versus you. It's a photo on Instagram of you looking in the mirror, captioned. But like that concept of like beating your previous best, like did you find that actually towards the end of prep that was a lot of pressure on you because of that concept of not being ready or not looking as lean as your previous shoot, those kinds of things?
Yeah, naturally, the thing that you're going to do is you're always going to be comparing yourself to the last time. And I think that's what I was doing. I think that might have brought in those like feelings of self-doubt, maybe like 6 weeks out, because I was thinking I was this lean I was about this lean from the last shoot. But then it does give you that it does give you that push in a positive way. But like I said, it might also give you that negative sort of mindset of thinking, I should be here by now, I should be this by now. But I actually think that it gave me the last time wasn't an enjoyable process. So this time, even if I was the same in terms of my physique, although like if you compare the photos, I will have to dig out the previous photo shoot photos, by the way. Like have to. But if I were to compare like the process from the first time to the second time, even if I look the same as I did the last time, I would have been happy because I didn't have to go to that extreme. But I think for sure you're naturally going to compare and you have to beat the last shoot, right? Like in terms of your physique. So yeah, I think I got like a bit of mixed emotions from doing my previous shoot, but I'd say it was more so like how the process was that gave me like the positive feeling of like actually to get in the condition that I got into this time, it didn't require me to go to such an extreme.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that as a concept. Like, I think there's numerous ways to compare it, right? And as long as
Mm.
it's not just outcome versus outcome, but it's actually like outcome and process versus outcome and process, when you compare those two, that's really, really important. I put a post out a couple of days ago about the importance of when you do something as big as a photo shoot, that the process is enjoyable along the way so that you kind of leave
Yeah.
it thinking, yeah, I could do another one in 2 years' time. Like I'd like to do another one in 2 years because I've spoken to so many people that have been like never again, and that's such a
That was
shame.
me.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, that there's that hesitancy because of the negative process you had previously, there is that like little bit of uncertainty that's like, do I want to suffer through all of that again? But hopefully now that you've done this prep this year, you're more confident going into the next one in the future because it's like, I know it's not as bad as it previously was. I know it
Yeah.
can be done better. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it was easier. Check. So like no, I'd now my like thought of a photo shoot is a lot different to the first time. And it's probably inevitable that I do one again.
Yeah. Good. I like it. What would you say? This is a hard question, might put you on the spot a bit. What would you say
Fair
was your biggest barrier throughout prep?
question. It was probably more of a mindset thing than like an adherence thing. So it was probably like a mindset of should we go more aggressive with the calories now? Like in the back of my mind, it was that thing of should we be pulling more? Like should we be pushing those calories lower?
Mm,
But the thing that probably what was the biggest teaching for me with this photo shoot in comparison to the last one is like it wasn't just about getting the weight down, hammering the deficit. It was also about my performance as well. And I think that if I were to look back at the photos, the first shoot was 100% just about creating as much of a deficit as possible. Whereas this time it was about like having enough calories to actually support my training. So I think the biggest barrier for me was just uh, accepting, not accepting, that's probably a bad way to put it, but almost understanding that my training is more important than what I believed it to be before the shoot in terms of how I've managed other diets. Other diets had always been just let's strip the calories, let's get the weight off, and not really putting that attention into my performance.
yeah, yeah. But it's kind of half of it is maybe like trusting the process, but
Yeah,
the process being doing it differently to how you've done it in the past, right?
yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And I resonate with that. I think we spend so because most of us coach Gen Pop for so long as well, most of our beliefs are built around the principles of Gen Pop coaching, right? Which is
yeah,
in their circumstance, get that fucking fat off them, put them in a deficit, get them committed to that deficit. That's it, right? No need to overcomplicate the process. They're going to get a great result. They'll be super happy with it. But with us as coaches, we kind of need to pull ourselves to that higher standard. So then if it's like, I want to turn up to a photo shoot and not just look shredded, but look jacked and shredded,
yeah.
then it's like, okay, what principles are we following to achieve that now? And maybe there's a couple of other boxes to tick. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I think that you're right in because it's like when you get a client and they start tracking, it's like okay, here's your protein, your calories, and then this is probably what was a big change. Even when we was in the bulking phase, it's like no, actually, your carbs are going to matter, and then your fats are going to matter as well. Like it's about your overall macros.
Yeah.
Um, I, I I do have like another barrier that I just thought of if you wanted to add to it, that was quite a big barrier.
Go on.
It was the time investment. So it's like, yeah, those like, I think maybe last like 4 to 5 weeks where it was like 15,000 steps. The biggest thing was obviously just like juggling work and then doing all that activity. Because like on days where it's like desk days, those days were difficult to get that 15K in. Um, I don't know if you want me to go on to like how I managed it or if you want me to leave it as
Go
the
for it.
barrier.
Yeah. Yeah. Please share.
5 a.m. wake ups with the answer. Like that was the only way that I could have made it work. Because obviously, like as a PT coach, you've got a million things that you need to be doing every day. So
Yeah.
if I didn't wake up earlier, then I probably would have been, you know, sleeping later, and that probably would have had more of a negative effect because I just kept my sleep time like consistent. So I think time investment was like a huge, maybe barrier is probably the right word, but definitely something that was a struggle towards.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that can't be, understated, right? Like ultimately there is going to be challenges we face with this. I think ironically, there would be like this paradox where if you never faced that kind of struggle, you'd have got to shoot day and been like, it was too easy. Like
Yeah, yeah,
there's more we should have done, right? So in a way, it's kind of
definitely.
good that you encountered that challenge because otherwise, yeah, we would have had this other weird thing to deal with. Um, but I know we had a lot of conversations towards the end because there's a funny period at probably the last 5, 6 weeks of prep is very what I would deem appropriate coaching would be very democratic, where a lot of those check-ins end up being a conversation of, I need to make a change this week. How do you feel food is? How do you feel expenditure is? Would you rather be hungrier or busier with steps and cardio? And you
Yeah,
kind of have those conversations. And I think they're really important conversations to have because it adds a bit of autonomy on your part where at least then you're not suffering it going fucking Jack is giving me more steps blah blah blah. It's
yeah,
like actually served on a plate, you've chosen them, if that makes sense. And I think that was a really key part to maintaining a positive relationship with the process for you.
Yeah, and I think that as well, like for the people listening back and like just anybody on a shoot, like everyone's journey is going to look like a little bit different because not everyone has that capacity to do more steps. It's like, someone's cut off might be like 12, 13,000. And there is that part of obviously like a shoot prep where it's like the last like 2 to 4 weeks, like you're probably just going to do what it takes anyway because of the mindset that you're in. But I think we went down like the higher activity route anyway because we needed those calories to facilitate training. And I think that I'd have rather picked the steps, had my training performance a little bit better, and then obviously, my potential for maintaining my muscle mass was higher because my numbers are better.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. Pick your battles, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, massive. Love that. Is there any lessons that you've learned along the way? Is there anything, maybe this is a bit of a different question because you've prepped clients as well for photo shoots, right? So is there anything now that you would do differently with a client having gone through your journey?
good question. I think that I'd be more specific with like macros. I think maybe I'm a little bit like have been a little bit loose with like just like calories and protein, but because of the performance benefits I saw from like specific macros, I'd definitely go down that route. Um, and I think kind of what you just said as well, of like giving the clients some sort of autonomy to be like, well, there's two routes that we can go down, activity or calorie reduction. I think that could be useful as well. So the client has, I mean, because they're both going to do ultimately the same thing, but maybe they feel uh, it's less taxing if they've made the decision. So that could be one thing as well. But I think the biggest thing was the peak week. I've not really taken a client through the peak week just because of their mindset towards food is completely different to
Yeah.
what mine was. Well, I mean, I did have that little bit of a mindset to be like, should I really be eating that much food on peak week? But I guess like I saw how that complemented my physique. And I think that moving forward, it'll probably be something that I experiment with more is peak week with clients, providing that they've got enough tissue for it to work.
Totally, man. Yeah, definitely agree. Just for the guys, because I know some of these guys will have probably be very unfamiliar with a peak week, and some might have done it on their own, but want to know the difference. I'm actually going to share your sheets if that's okay.
Oh yeah,
Um, just to show what the peak week looked like, just for anyone. So it was very, very simple with Jimmy. Like we were kind of starting to peak about 5 days out. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and then the day of the shoot. And really all we did, super simple, is we had like a bit of a fat refeed on day one, and then went into 2 days of carb refeeding. And did we push carbs higher than this in the end, Jimmy? Did we?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we did because I was like, you want me to keep eating that? Because it was like that moment of like, this is being completely in back of my head. I was like, no, I'm not going to eat that, but I did it. I was like, I did. I was like, why is he getting me to eat more food? Because if you remember, there was that like day where I showed you like what I was planning to eat, and he was like, you can't be eating all that bread. It was like 5 slices of bread, and then like we did change like what I was eating, but yeah, we did. I think we did 2 days at 2,600.
Cool. Yeah. And I think this settling day we pulled a little higher as well because your weight wasn't going up, I
That
think.
yeah, that was right. Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
soaking soaking it all.
Yeah. So you were just, you were absolutely soaking it in. But what we saw in calorie increase, we saw an expenditure increase, like just
Yeah,
matched it straight away, right? So that's the thing we're kind of looking for in peak week is your body weight increasing at all? And our job is to, get it up by 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, because we know that's going to be glycogen. Um, So yeah, we ended up pushing more food in, and ironically, your weight just kept falling, which was great because you turned up shredded, but you still looked very full, which was cool.
yeah. I would probably say like that peak week is what made the shoot, if you know what I mean. Like that made me because I felt like obviously you're gonna feel flat, aren't you? But I think that the success of that peak read made those photos look 10 times better.
You say this, yeah, because I think about that sometimes. I was actually looking, I was reminiscing, as you do when you're fucking sad and got nothing else to do. I was reminiscing about my previous photo shoot, and I was looking at, I had photos done before I got tanned, and I was looking at the photos, and I was like, fuck, I look really flat and small there. And I was like, I don't remember feeling that flat and small. And then I scrolled across because it was kind of in line with the peak. So I was scrolling across to as I was
Yeah,
peaking. And then on the day of the shoot, I looked much fuller, vascular, pumped, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, yeah. So it is going to be a circumstance where some people are just very sensitive to those peaking changes. They run flat and then when they pump up and fill out, they look fucking amazing. And we actually saw that in one of your check-in photos. You took it post-workout. Do you remember you sent me a
yeah,
post-workout
yeah,
photo and I sent you a message back and I was like, fucking hell, you filled out ridiculously in the last
yeah,
5 days. Um, and you were clearly one of those people that would look different with a pump and without a pump. Yeah. So then when we know with peaking, it would be the same. Peaking is essentially just loading you into the perfect state to then pump up incredibly well. Yeah. So as long as we could run you into the shoot really lean, we knew that you would pump up pretty well as long as obviously the conditions were right. So yeah, I think we just got it right
yeah.
and
We're like
that's
dead
that's
on.
pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, man. And you've not rebounded, which is cool. Talk to me about your relationship with food.
no issues at all. Like, I literally like because of how low my calories have been in the past. So for context, the last shoot was 1,000 calories. Like the last few weeks were 1,000 calories.
What did we get down to?
It was 1,900, wasn't it? But it
Something
was more so like 2,000. So like there was this massive difference of like calories, and because of like the peak week as well and how much food I had then, it didn't even feel like I needed or want. Well, I wanted like anything that was like hyper palatable. I didn't have like the cravings, and I think that's why like I found the shoot like comparatively easy to last time was because our calories were so much higher.
Yeah.
So yeah, to answer your question, absolutely no like issues with my relationship with food, like, not affected at all.
Yeah, which is cool, man. Yeah, I'm not going to say we can guarantee that for everybody. Obviously, everyone's got different sensitivities to that kind of situation. But I think, between the refeed working so well, your history of dieting much lower than that in the past, and probably a little bit on, if we give some ownership back to you, like devising a diet that wasn't so restrictive that you
Yeah,
hated every second of it. There's some credit there.
yeah. Like looking back at my food, like I just I enjoy like, I'm enjoying it now. I was enjoying it in the shoot prep. Like there was like stuff that I enjoyed in there, and like even like meals out, like I still had foods like Nando's and stuff like that. Like I enjoy that food.
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah, I think that is key for when you're setting up your nutrition. It's like you don't have to like go into that almost that place of like I'm on a shoot prep. I need to strip everything that I enjoy. Like essentially still want to be having like majority like unprocessed whole foods because we know that's going to be like key for those last few weeks of when hunger's high. But yeah, I still was enjoying my food. Like
Yeah,
I
that's
wasn't
cool. I like
just chicken salad. Like,
that. I mean, yeah, so what, 20 weeks in total, 16 to 17 kilos down in total we got off your frame, which is pretty cool. So obviously from the start to the end of the prep, you're almost like a slightly different person, not just physically, but mentally, energetically, stuff like that. Talk to me about the importance of support network and, managing those around you, because obviously you've got Mrs. Vanessa. It was her
yeah.
birthday as well. Like you sacrificed some things, but what role did she play in that? And like, how did you manage your relationship throughout?
Yeah, honestly, like if you have a if you have a partner going into shoot, like, open conversation, like just have that conversation, set the expectations up. So luckily Vanessa is like she'll pretty much just like as long as there's something in it for her, like and we had that conversation, she'll be fine. So basically, at the start of prep, I was like, "We're gonna do this this thing. We're gonna do photo shoot. Are you okay with like us changing what we do for the weekends?" Like, and she was completely fine with it. What we did as well is like we just adjusted what we normally do, especially on those like last few weeks with steps. We tried to do more activities that were active. So like we did a couple of hikes, we did a couple of like really long walks. But I think just having like an honest conversation was key. And then I almost like worded it in a way to like after the prep, like whatever you want to do, like we can do. So it's like almost like saying like, look, it might be a bit like tricky these next few weeks, but after that, there's something that we can sort of book in. We still had date nights every week, but the date nights were just like more focused on like watching a film than it was like food related. So yeah, she was happy. She had no complaints.
Nice, man. Yeah, I think that's important. I think sometimes because it's our goal, sometimes we completely forget to involve those around us without thinking how it's going to impact them. So I did want to bring that up. It's a trend that I've seen in people that have prepped pretty successfully, is that ability to communicate with those around them. I remember me and Loz, it was our anniversary when I was last prepping, and I took her down to London. Like, but we went to see like Cursed Child and shit at the theater. It's very good. Would recommend. Um, but like that was like our compromise. So even though I couldn't be completely free with food, where we'd normally enjoy a lot of different foods and stuff, we still found moments to enjoy, and I think that's pretty important. So it's cool to see that you did that like pretty automatically as well. You know, there was no report to me as to like, you know, I'm getting friction from my missus or anything like that. It's kind of like there was no problem throughout the entire thing.
Yeah, I think it's like, I mean, it's not that I said it directly to Vanessa, but it's like to have a good time, it doesn't always have to be food related anyways. Like we still like had a good time if we were walking. Like it's more about like the moments and it's about the food.
Yeah.
Although she's in control of like the weekends at the minute, so you pay a price to an extent. But yeah, I think that conversation and that's where it's got to start.
Nice. Biggest piece of advice for someone that's going through or going to start a 20-week prep?
I could give it a few, but I think what works for me were just like systems and habits. Like I think that every part of my day was just like structured. So like every single day, Google Calendar, this is my time for my steps, this is my time for my training, this is also my time for obviously coaching related activities as well. So like literally every day was mapped out, even the weekends as well. And almost not trying to like have everything like 100%. So at the back end of prep, I almost like took it with coach and I was like, for now, I'm just going to try and maintain like the vials. So like obviously like client delivery, like content, trying to get at least three posts, doing my check-ins. So I'd say like try not to balance all your plates. Like it's fine to let a few things go. Like social life, like that did that did disappear sort of like 4 weeks, and your friends are still going to be there after. Like I think that structure and also having not trying to seek balance, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned in terms of time frame as well, right? Because I think there's absolutely balance that can be had, like the first 4 weeks into prep, right?
Yeah,
Where your steps aren't super high, your cardio is not super high, like you can manage things pretty well. But I like to think of it as like an element of taking things like to that next level. You know, when if you
mm,
really want to achieve something incredible, there has to be something else you sacrifice. And sometimes it is, yeah, like workload, like you might not be pushing your lead generation and your outreach and stuff as far, or it might be your socials or your relationships or whatever else. Like there is a sacrifice that comes, and it's usually at the point where you achieve something beyond yourself, you know, something you've never achieved before. And thus, it's a really hard line for people to cross because it's like there's more sacrifice here now. And this is why so many people don't achieve incredible things. And that's okay. But yeah, I guess that, you know, that willingness to sacrifice little bits is going to be what takes you to the next level, right?
yeah, and like you say, it wasn't that I needed to sacrifice every part of my life for 20 weeks. Like it was just that last bit. And it's, I think once you're there as well in the last like 8 weeks, you want to make that sacrifice anyway. Because like if I don't give it everything, then I might have that regret on shoot day to be like, oh, do you know what? I could have done more. But like when you go in there and it's that thing of like process focused, and it's like if I've like ticked every single box, I've done everything, I've made that little bit of sacrifice, then the feeling of reward after is massive. And I think that if you go into like shoot day and you thought, I could have done a little bit more, then you don't want to have that feeling of regret. But yeah, it's definitely only like it's a small, really, it's really very small time frame that I think you have to be like in there.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I know I can't remember if that's something we talked about on shoot day or not, but that's something that I try and tell every client, like especially when they're talking about being unsure whether they're going to be ready on the shoot day, is if you've ticked every box, if you've done everything that you genuinely think you were capable of, then you've got to be pleased with the result,
Yeah,
because the effort couldn't have been any higher, and thus this is the best you could have brought to today, and I think that's a really important concept to get the head around, because you can't wish or want for something that was never there, right? But if you don't tick all the boxes, if you
yeah,
leave room margin for error, that concept of no stone left unturned, like if there are stones left unturned, then yeah, like you're going to get to shoot day. And if you're not happy with the look, you're going to look back and think, what if? And that's a
yeah.
fucking horrible feeling to have.
And definitely, you said this. I think it was like maybe it was like 6 weeks out, and I said on one of the check-ins, I was like, naturally, I'm getting those like feelings of self-doubt, and something that like just put my mind at ease immediately. It was like, as long as you go in there knowing that you've done everything that you can do, then what else could you have done? Like you
Yeah.
literally could not have done anything else. And I think he also made a comment as like, it's your job to worry about like what I'm looking like. So it's a reflection on you as well. I was like, oh, that's fine. As long as I do what I'm told, then it's going to be cool.
Yeah, yeah. That's like that's like my magic case up the sleeve, that one. When you use the look, as long as you've ticked every box and you get there on shoot day, you couldn't have done any better. If you can tell that's not quite hitting the mark with someone, you can always just be like, look, it's my job to worry about these things. Do you think I'm gonna let you turn up on shoot day looking
Yeah.
shit? No, because that's my
It's a
result.
reflection on you as well, right?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, maybe, maybe.
It does work though.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. All right, cool. Let's open it up to the floor and see if anyone's got any questions before we close off the call. Obviously, Sam, you've done a shoot before. Jamie, you're on prep. Jay, you've got one planned for next year. Dylan, I know you're interested in this kind of conversations. Do you guys have any questions for Jimmy? What's the idea with fat loading? Jimmy, do you remember? Did I tell you? Did I teach
Oh,
you this?
I think what you said was a concept that you was playing around with.
Yeah,
Um, but I can't remember anything else. This
that's
will help me with my education. So yeah.
There you go. That's cool. So fat loading is a concept really popularized by a guy called Scott Stevenson, who wrote a paper on this. He wrote an article on this, should I say? And it is really just a trial and error thing. The thing that I have noticed with someone that is incredibly lean is sometimes like fat loading can make them look a little bit fuller. Because we do store intramuscular triglycerides, right? So it sounds like a complicated term, but it is to fats what glycogen is to carbs, right? So we store glycogen in the muscle tissue, it's carbohydrate. Well, we store intramuscular triglycerides, that's just stored fat in the muscle tissue as well. So you can use fat loading as an approach. It can also sometimes help someone pump up, but like I said, it really just works with people that are like diced. I kind of pull it out and use it when I think it's appropriate. Um, and to be honest, like I don't see the efficacy being so huge that it's like everyone needs to do it. But it is something that I like to play around with sometimes. I only do one day as well. Like carb loading is a winner for most people. Is carb loading also trial and error thing? So you'd bump them up with the aim of a half kilo increase in peak week. Jimmy, do you remember? Did we trial and error your carb load?
Yeah, well, we changed it, didn't we, for the last 2 days? So it depends on our response. So, like, if my weight was increasing, then we'd obviously wouldn't have gone as aggressive. But because my weight was maintaining and dropping, then obviously we bumped it up. My lowest weight was actually the last day of prep, which it got into 69s, which is crazy after those carbs.
Yeah, man. That's nuts. That's nuts. And it is just one of those things because you're not sure as well like how much digestive weight someone might be holding. Toilet habits become pretty irregular by the end of prep. So actually increasing food can sometimes just flush through food through your digestive tract a little bit quicker. So that's sometimes why people drop. But like we said, there's a huge expenditure change as well with people. So we talk about this concept of adaptive thermogenesis, right? When someone's dieting, they'll try and conserve energy where they can. Well, if your calories just randomly shoot up, your body's suddenly like, oh, fuck, all these processes that we switched off, we can switch back on. Um, so that can sometimes lead to someone dropping quite a lot of weight. So it is very trial and error. For most like for most people, I'll go in very conservative, right? With Jimmy, at the body weight he was at, that was still pretty conservative. I think the first day was like 3 or 320 carbs. That's very conservative for someone of his body weight. Like you'll hear about some people in like bodybuilding shows that'll push like 5 to 700 grams of carbs per day. For me, there is no reason to do that, especially for someone doing a shoot, right? Because if you go in conservative and their body weight holds or drops, you can just push up again. It's fine. So that's what we did. So we ended up pushing up a lot higher the second day. And then the third day was supposed to be like a settling point, but we ended up pushing up again because his weight kept dropping. And that's the thing you can't like guarantee, right? When I did MNU, it was very much, um, number driven. It was very much like per kilo, put this many carbs in, blah, blah, blah. But based on my experience, it is really just about getting that data as soon as you can and then making a judgment call the next day. So yeah, it's very much data collection, making a judgment call. Does the person need more food? Are they looking better? That's a big thing. As long as they're looking better, you're peaking well. That's kind of what we're looking for. Um, Sometimes you can do a bit of a mock peak week. So the week before their shoot, you can trial a peak week to see how it feels. Not the full peak, but the refeed. You might trial 2 or 3 days of a refeed to see how their body responds, and that will tell you more information for the actual peak week. But like I said, if you're going to go in conservative, you don't need to waste a few days of not dieting for that. It's not necessary for most people. So if someone's ready very early, then I would mock peak them. Um, but usually I kind of coach people in pretty easily now. I've done it for long enough now. Um, Last question, how do you know you've got the best result possible out of the look? How do you set that expectation? That is a really good question. Um, because there's things that you can't always plan for, right? Like I could get Jimmy absolutely shredded, full as a house, best he's ever looked. But if he's not conscientious of who tans him, how he removes his hair, if he gets a haircut the day of the shoot or the before the shoot, sorry, the clothes that he brings, his treatment of the tan 24 hours before, and then his ability to pose on the day, doesn't matter how good he looks. Like if he poses like a dork, then he's going to look like a bit of a dick, right?
You did
So
call that out on I think it was one of the check-ins. I was holding a bit of like a bad posture. Was like, you need to fix that.
yeah, you were just like a little bit kyphotic, I think.
Yeah.
But you were quite good at posing, to be fair. Like you,
I were practicing it when you called me out on it. I was like,
yeah,
I need to get that. I'm like, I'm not doing all this work because that's a really good question, actually, isn't it? It's because like your photo shoot isn't just about the prep; it's about how you deliver on the day and all those like variables like your tan, your posing, like because it's just a shot, isn't it, of how you're looking.
exactly, man. And we tend to, as humans, we tend to hyper focus as well on the
Yeah,
flaws, right? So my second shoot that I did, did you use hair removal cream or did you just use the shaver?
I just shaved it because I
Yeah.
trialed it. This is a good point as well. Like I have a trial run of like shaving because I trialed it with hair removal and I came out in a massive rash. So definitely good advice is to do a trial run because if I was coming into my shoot with that rash,
Exactly right. There's things that you need to micromanage that will affect more than just the amount of fat you've got in your body, right? So that's really important. On my second shoot, I used hair removal cream and it was fine. I didn't have a reaction to it or anything, but I timed it wrong. So like I had like little burn blisters on my
yeah,
elbows, which is really fucking annoying. So like in some of my photos, I can see it and I hyper focus on it rather than thinking, oh, look how lean I look.
just
It's
yeah,
like I've
just
got
absolutely shredded. But you're like, I've got these things on my
exactly,
arm.
exactly. So this concept of a best result possible, it is like, I like to think of it as like the pageantry phase at the end, right? Like you've got your prep phase where you're getting everything ready and getting that person primed for a really good photo shoot prep. Then you've got your photo shoot prep itself, which is a pushing phase, right? You're fucking driving them through the floor basically. And then you've got this pageantry phase that's anywhere from like a week to 5 days, depending. And it usually aligns with peak week, where the person has to focus on how they look cosmetically, which is really fucking weird. And it's kind of ironic because you're doing like 19 weeks of really hardcore masculine things, and then there's this 1 week at the end where you're like, have you shaved and have you got your tan ready and have you done your
Yeah,
hair? And it's fucking
it was
stupid.
like because I was asking like questions about like should my spray tan be before or like 2 days before. I was like, when do you even ask these questions?
Yeah, literally. Yeah, because that threw a bit of a spanner in the works for me. I think Carl had the same situation now, and it's a bit more of a common thing now. But my past shoots have always been
The day before.
day before, get your spray tan, and your tanner was obviously like, oh no, we're gonna do it 2 days before.
Yeah.
Yeah, weird, threw me off. I did actually mean the prep here, but yeah, that's also plenty more worth considering. So with the prep, I usually go down the same line, which is a 1% loss per week. That's like all I aim for. It's super simple for me. It's super simple for clients. It's usually the fastest you would want to go without losing muscle tissue. That tends to be what the research supports as well. So we can't really go any faster than 1%. So as well as it's a really good way of holding the client accountable if they're like, oh, I'm not going to be ready. It's like if you want to go faster, you're going to risk some muscle loss. So this is the fastest we can go. And it's a really good way of just settling everything down. All right. So I usually try and move things around until I'm getting a consistent 1% loss per week. Of course, at the very start, if you're going straight from a gaining phase, you drop pretty quickly anyway, but then it settles very quickly as well. So usually by weeks 2, 3, and 4, you want to be averaging about a 1% loss per week, in my opinion, if someone is holding plenty of body fat. If someone's starting prep shredded, then obviously you would slow that right down. You would maybe go 0.5%, maybe even 1/4%. Um, but 1% loss is really, really nice. And then you just scope the size of the prep depending on how much body fat that person has. Right. So obviously Jimmy at the end of a gaining phase where we've really been pushing some weight on him, like he's going to need a solid 20 weeks. Whereas if someone was starting at like 14%, they might only need 14 weeks, 16 weeks. Yeah. And if someone's starting very heavy, like 30% body fat, and is like, Dylan, I want to do a photo shoot, then you're like, cool, no worries. We're probably going to take about a year to do this. And you would probably do a diet break, and then do a second diet. Yeah. So it just depends on the person, right? Like that's a big thing. Long preps don't tend to be harder. They actually tend to be easier because you can be less aggressive as well. Is that body fat just a visual estimation? Yeah, just visually estimate. That's absolutely fine. Booking the shoot. Jimmy, do you remember when we booked your shoot?
I
How
think it's
how
like it was after my holiday, wasn't it? So I think it was like
like 10 weeks out, 11 weeks out?
yeah, it was definitely more than six
Let me
because
have a look.
6 weeks out I think was I'm losing track of time. Yeah, six. No, I think it was like 6 weeks out.
Oh,
So
really? So
7 weeks, 8 weeks.
Lanzarote, when you went away, Lanzarote was 10 weeks out. So if it was after
It
you
was a
came back,
couple of
it
weeks
was
after, yeah, a couple of weeks after holiday, I think.
yeah. So we were still like 7 weeks out, Dylan. Like we'd not started prep with with a shoot booked, right? And I think sometimes there's pros and cons to this. obviously, like Jimmy would have felt a lot of pressure if we were like, oh, by the way, Jimmy, in 16 weeks, we've got a shoot booked. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. And it's great for like massive action. But if that person's already an action taker, then there's no reason why you can't just diet, 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 diet. We'll talk about this when we get Mr. Sam Willard in the client hot seat at some point. But his shoot wasn't booked. Like, in fact, his diet wasn't meant to be a prep at the start. And he'd done about 8 weeks of dieting, give or take. And then he was like, let's just do a shoot. Like, we're here now. Um, and that's the thing about shoots. That's a great thing is like, actually, most photographers will have space within about 6 weeks or so. So you can either prep someone and then when that client is about 6 weeks out, start messaging around and seeing who's available. Or you could diet someone, and if they're looking fantastic, you just be like, "You want to do a shoot? Do you fancy doing a photo shoot?" Yeah, like Jimmy. Obviously, you've prepped photo shoot clients. Have you had anyone in the past that you dieted and then they decided to do a shoot at a later date, or has it always been from day one they wanted to do a shoot?
It's always been like when they've actually like got fairly lead, and then I've proposed it to them.
There you go.
Um, but I would definitely agree with you as well if like get the results and then book it. Cause like my last one was a 16-week prep, and straight from the bat, like you feel that pressure of like, oh, 16 weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there is value in maybe like getting some results first, get them in like the stage of action, and then booking that.
Yeah, exactly. And it tends to be because there's less of a rush, the person tends to be calmer. And
Yeah,
ironically, we would assume that that person would diet harder because the shoot is there, but people self-sabotage when that happens because if
they
they're like
lose their heads.
if they think I'm not going to be ready, then in their head they're like, "Fuck it. Well, why am I dieting anyway?" And that's when they crack,
Yeah,
right? So if there's no shoot booked, it's like it's cool. Like there's no shoot booked. We just coast in. You're always going to be ready because it's not booked yet. And they're calmer, and when they're calmer, there's less emotional eating involved and stuff. So yeah, that's something that I've actually picked up along the way. Like my first shoot was booked. My first few clients, I booked their shoot in advance. And nowadays, I don't recommend someone books their shoot until they're like halfway there at least. Yeah.
yeah, I feel the same. I think maybe it was maybe it was my second shoot that I ever did. It was a lady. She was a bit skeptical about doing it anyway. And I remember that we booked it like 12 weeks out, and I could tell like towards the end, like she was losing her head a little bit because she was panicking. So like, yeah, maybe there is a lot of value in like delaying it and be like, cool, now we've just got 4 weeks once they're pretty much there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we had this conversation as well when you had that moment where you're like, I'm not sure if I'll be ready, where we talked about potentially pushing the shoot back. And a lot of people struggle with the idea, like really struggle with the idea. I've only ever had to do it with one person, who I used to coach, his Gen Pop client that was doing a shoot prep, and she was so uh like neurotic with the concept of being ready and beating her previous best and stuff. I had to really talk her around to like pushing it back 4 weeks. Whereas in reality, there's no like losing with that. Like it's not
Yeah.
competition, right? Like there's nothing to lose. But again, people struggle to let go of that idea.
Yeah, and we were never going to actually push it back, but it's quite a nice feeling to have that there, and it kind of just relaxes you a little bit to be like, actually, if we need to, we can delay it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's fine. Like it's a bit strange really, isn't it? Like as a concept
Yeah,
that you wouldn't be allowed to push it back. It's but I struggle to see how much body fat in weight someone would need to lose to get lean enough, which makes road mapping a bit more tough for me when following the weekly 1%. Uh, okay, super simple. When in doubt, there's always more to come off. All right. If you look at someone and it's like, yeah, they're holding quite a lot of fat, then always assume like 30% plus. Right. But in reality, you don't have to worry about timelining someone until, like we said, until they're halfway there, right? So it doesn't matter. You don't need to follow a 1% rule or guideline until they're probably at around 14%, give or take. And then you can be like, obviously for a male, and then you can be like, okay, cool. From here, I reckon we've got X amount of time at 1% loss per week. right? Like, don't worry about timelining them until they're at that point. If they're just really fat and you can't tell how long it's going to be, at least a year. Just give them at least a year, right? Because it's very rare someone's come to me really fat and been ready for a photo shoot anyway, like mentally, this the same mindset that got them into that shape. They're not suddenly just going to flip a switch and be ready to go. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of behavior change that needs to happen anyway with that. So yeah, for anyone that's carrying plenty of body fat, at least a year, I would say. If someone's done it in the past, has experience, has confidence, then obviously that's different.